Everyone is talking about the Odyssey, and I'm finally ready to join the conversation. I've listened to what a lot of people have to say about it, from your regular commentators who are just expressing the normal opinions of the everyman, to movie critics who specialize in the arts and are breaking things down in that critical way, to people with PhDs in Greek literature who are getting into the nitty-gritty. And after listening to multiple people express their opinions from multiple different viewpoints, I feel like I have something to say for whatever that is or isn't worth. So I'm going to break this down into a couple of different parts, and if you're only interested in one part, you can just go ahead and skip to that. But I want to talk about the place that I'm approaching this from, because everybody has their own perspective. They're all coming at this from a specific direction, and so I want to be clear about the direction that I'm approaching this from. And then we will talk about the book, the poem by Homer. We'll talk about the movie, and in the end, we'll wrap up with the ultimate conclusions and whatever takeaways there are. So where am I approaching this from? Like a lot of people, I was excited about the movie, but I will admit right off the bat that I had not read the poem. In high school, I had read the Iliad. And I'm going to outrage everyone by saying I was incredibly disappointed. Okay, I went into it with very specific expectations. And as a teenager, those expectations being disappointed was not something that left a positive taste in my mouth. So I loved the story of Troy. I wanted to go to the source material. I wanted to know exactly what had happened, how had Paris and Helen gotten together, started this whole mess. I wanted to know exactly what had happened with the Trojan horse, how it had gone down in the original, what happened once they were inside the gates. I wanted the original details. First of all, I was thrown by how active the Greek gods were in this story. I don't think that's a negative thing, but it was not something I was prepared for or something I had seen in other literature that I had read up until that point. I had read a lot of Dickens and the classics and that sort of stuff, and this was just a different viewpoint on the world, one that was strange to me and unexpected, and I didn't quite know how to wrap my head around it, because the gods were very active in it, constantly interfering in the story and manipulating outcomes. They were not all benevolent by any means. They were often capricious and self-centered, and this was just kind of weird for me to wrap my head around as a teenager. But still, it's like, okay, you adjust to that. You still want to know what happens in the story. I still was not entirely clear on, did Paris kidnap Helen or did he seduce her? I mean, yes, the goddesses come to him with the contest, and which one of us is the prettiest, and he gets a certain prize from each one if he picks them, and he picks the one who'll give him the most beautiful woman in the world, and so she ensures that he winds up with Helen, even though Helen is married to Menelaus. But it's not really clear, does Helen have a say in this? Does she run off and leave her husband having an affair with Paris, or is she kidnapped by him? Not really clear, so that part of my question was not unanswered. That part of my question was not answered. But one thing was clear to me as a teenager. They should have killed Paris. Okay, I'm just saying it. They should have killed that boy. I mean, so that he can have this one woman, a guy who's probably got hundreds of women especially in a time with slaves and concubines and all the rest of that. And so that he can have this one woman, he's going to let his countrymen die and his city burn. They should have killed him, okay? Maybe Helen, too. I don't know how complicit she was in this. Bottom line, I was not on either of their sides. But the story was not really ultimately about them. The Iliad was mainly about Achilles. Agamemnon and Menelaus are also featured prominently, but not nearly as prominently as Achilles. And Agamemnon struck me as being there purely for glory. Nothing inherently wrong about that, but nothing that I, as a modern woman, especially admire about that. Usually the people that are held up to us as heroes that you admire for fighting are people who are fighting for something bigger. Menelaus is fighting to get his wife back, which, okay, yeah, sure, if somebody's kidnapped your wife, you go fight and you get her back. But it wasn't clear if Helen was kidnapped. So maybe she had run off with Paris, which, okay, if that was the case, I could at least understand why he would feel vengeful. But vengeance is not a hugely admirable motive either, and, I mean, if she had run off because he was abusive or something, well, then it's definitely not admirable. So I was kind of ambivalent about Menelaus because I didn't know enough about the circumstances here to really judge him. So it basically came down to Achilles. And Achilles was incredibly impressive as a warrior. He's definitely positioned as the hero of the story. And yet, from my teenage mind as I read it, he was kind of a little bitch. I mean, I'm just saying it, okay? I don't know how else to express it. It's like, he's there, he can keep his countrymen from dying, but he's going to sit on the beach and pout. And I'm supposed to admire this. You know, he's not getting enough of the glory from Agamemnon, so he's going to let people die. Okay, you're kind of being a little bit of a bitch, okay? You really are. So I didn't find anything excessively admirable in Achilles other than his just inherent, seemingly unearned prowess in battle, which was incredibly impressive, but not really admirable. There's a difference. The only person I liked in the story was Hector. Hector was a good man. His little brother drags him into this for his totally selfish reasons. Dude is fighting for his country. He's fighting for his wife and his baby and his country, and so that his men won't die. He's fighting for all the right reasons. Hector is frickin' admirable, and he's almost as good of a warrior as Achilles. So Hector I liked. And Homer killed him. Okay? And as a teenager, that did not sit well with me. I'm just going to say it. I was like, what did you just do? This is the one and only person in the story that I think is worth anything, and you killed him. And once again, it does not reflect well on Achilles from my point of view, because Achilles has got this friend, in air quotes, Patroclus, and look, modern people always try to project onto past stories and even onto historical characters, and it's been a trend over recent years to try to make everyone in history and everyone in literature secretly gay. I think that's dumb. I think it reflects an incredible ignorance about historical context, and most of all, I think it reflects an incredible amount of insecurity that you need to rewrite history in this way. So I do not approach history through that lens. I do not approach literature through that lens. And even so, I was looking at Achilles and Patroclus in this going, sure, friends, okay. You know, if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about here. there was some pretty heavy implications that the two of them were more than friends. Fine. But Patroclus wants to fight. Achilles wants to sit there on the beach and be a diva. And so Patroclus steals his armor, dresses up like him, pretends to be him, goes into battle. Hector thinks he's fighting Achilles. He's not. Patroclus is not Achilles. He does not have his prowess in battle. He dies. Hector feels terrible. He thought he had killed Achilles. He thought he was fighting Achilles. It was not Achilles. Hector didn't do anything wrong. Who did something wrong? Patroclus. He's the one who did it all. And can't exactly punish Patroclus. He's dead. But out of the living, who is to blame? Achilles, because he's sitting on the beach like a diva instead of stepping up and fighting. And because he made that choice, Patroclus died. But can he step up like a man and be responsible for the outcomes of his decision? No, it's Hector's fault. Hector should have had telepathy and known that it was Patroclus instead of maybe like, keep an eye on your lover there, Achilles. Like, where is he? Where is your armor? Do you have any idea what is going on around you? Maybe you need to look in the mirror before you blame other people. No, let's blame Hector. He goes, he kills Hector, then he takes things way too far. And after Hector's dead, like bores holes in his ankles, ties ropes through him, drags him 3 times around the city, desecrates his corpse, just goes on a frickin' rampage, doesn't let his daddy bury him, drags him off. I'm sitting here as a teenager going, why have I done this to myself? I have tortured myself with a book full of characters I don't actually like. The one character I do like is now dead. Would we bring on the frickin' Trojan horse? Okay, that's what I want to know. I want to know what actually happened with the Trojan horse. Now, if you've read the Iliad, you know where this is going. Because just when we get to that point, Hector's father Priam sneaks into the camp of the Greeks, goes to Achilles, begs for his body. Achilles kind of recognizes that he's been, shall we say, an ass, and he has, relents, gives Hector's body back, says, you know what, I'll even try to go a little bit the extra mile in trying to make things right here and give you time for a funeral. So we're not going to attack Troy. I will guarantee that no Greeks attack Troy for several days while you bury your son and give him all the proper funeral rites. And then Homer goes, and I think I'm done. Story over. I'm like, what do you mean, story over? This is where the story starts, dude. What the? I was not happy. Okay. I was very, very let down. So I did not read the Odyssey. Okay, the Iliad was about Troy. The Odyssey is about some guy in a boat fighting a Cyclops. It's basically Gulliver's Travels in Ancient Times. I wasn't really interested in it to begin with. I wanted to know about Troy, and the book that was supposed to tell me about Troy didn't really tell me the things I wanted to know about Troy, so I kind of wrote Homer off. That was where I was coming at all of this from, okay? So I'm not going to pretend like I had read the books and over again and really studied them and front here, okay? But I do like these types of movies. I liked the movie Troy when it came out, the one with Brad Pitt, Eric Bana, Peter O'Toole, Orlando Bloom. It was a great cast. It was a good movie. It was well done. Sean Bean plays Odysseus in that. He was very good in that role, perfectly cast for that kind of character. It was a good movie. I enjoyed it. Once again, I thought they should have killed Paris and Helen. They seriously should have just thrown them over the walls and said, you take them away, not our problem. Okay? And yes, once again, I was rooting for Hector. Okay? I hold it deeply against Brad Pitt that he killed Eric Bana. I do. Not really, but I do. Okay? I invest in my stories. So, that was where I was coming from. It's like, okay, great. This will be something kind of like that. There haven't been a lot of great movies lately, so let's do it. That's where I was coming to all this from. And then, of course, all the controversy about the movie and what was being done to it and speculation about what was being done to it came in. I was not deeply invested in that. We'll circle back around to some of that when we get up to the movie itself, but I was totally willing to wait and see. Yes, some of it sounded like, okay, this could be very bad. Some of it sounded like we're making a mountain out of a molehill. Not that it's nothing, but it's a molehill-sized problem, and we're turning it into a mountain. And I'm going to wait and see. In the meantime, I started, like I said, listening to some people talk about the book itself and realized that, okay, this is connected to the story of Troy. This is immediately after the fall of Troy, and Odysseus is headed home, and what happens to him on his journey home. And so it's kind of a continuation of the story. And I started listening to 2 or 3 people break down the story itself. And ultimately, I decided, while I was waiting for the movie to come out, I wanted to know more about the story. Hillsdale offers free courses. I'd never taken any of them before, but I'd enjoyed the podcasts I'd listened to about the story, wanted to get a little bit more in-depth on it, and so I did Hillsdale's 6-hour course on it. So that's where I'm coming at all this from. And I wanted to get into a little bit of what the actual original story is, because there were a couple of things about it that I did find incredibly interesting, especially after listening to these people who are passionate about the story, talk about it, break it down, and explain it. Now, many people who are very passionate about the book are most attached to the stories that Odysseus tells about the monsters he encountered, the sea monster, the cyclops, the lotus eaters, all of this sort of stuff. And I can understand why. That's the exciting part of the poem. And there's lots of people who have covered those episodes in the saga, so there's not really a point in me going into those, because what I found most interesting in the story was the 4 women that Odysseus had to choose between. So you've got Circe is the first one he meets, then Calypso, then Nausicaa, and finally his wife, Penelope. And it was interesting to me what each woman represented, what he could have had with each woman, what was insufficient about each offer, and what he ultimately chose and why, and the lesson inherent in that. So just to briefly recap, after Odysseus has sailed away from Troy, he and his men made a couple of stops along the way. I think the lotus eaters have already happened by this point. But he winds up stopping at this island where he's going to meet Circe. And it is a wild island. It is forested. It's got kind of a medieval feel to it. It's magical. She is herself a witch. She has bewitched beasts. She has wolves and lions that she controls as pets. This is a primal forest with primal animals controlled by a primal magic. And Odysseus and his men divide up into 2 parties, draw straws for who's going to go check things out. His men go check things out, and Circe turns them all into pigs. Now, what's interesting is that the poem specifies that they were turned into pigs except for their mind. Their mind remained man. So they were fully conscious of what had happened to them, but outwardly They were now pigs. She herds them into a pen. She's feeding them slops. And they're fully aware of what has happened to them. They still have the minds of men. Okay, so Odysseus, one of the men, escapes, tells Odysseus what has happened. And Odysseus, as you probably heard many people talk about, is described as a man of polytropos, a man of many twists and turns. He's cunning. That is why he came up with the idea of the Trojan horse. He's cunning. He is able to outmaneuver people mentally. That is his great gift. You know, there's a line in the movie Troy, the version of Odysseus that Sean Bean plays, when Achilles tells him, "Play your tricks on me, but not my cousin." And he says, "We all play with the toys the gods give us." This is the toy that the gods have given him. He has the ability for cunning and outmaneuvering people. When he finds out that his men have been enchanted, he's going to go in there as the warrior and try to forcibly overpower Circe and save his men. Before he can get there, a god, I believe it's Hermes, I know it is in a couple of other episodes, but I'm forgetting right now for sure whether it's him. I think it is. Anyway, stops him and says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold your horses. You can't just go charging in here, sword drawn, and try this. You need to use your cunning. Here's an herb that will keep her magic from working on you. And ultimately, you need to understand something, Odysseus. She is going to want to sleep with you. And dude, you're going to have to take one for the team. Not for you. I know what a sacrifice it is to have to sleep with this beautiful woman. But it's not for you, man. It's for your men. Be a hero. This is what a leader is, dude." Tell me a man did not write this fantasy. The only way, man, that you can save your men, your brother in arms, this is why they follow you into battle. This is what being a leader is. You're going to have sex with a beautiful woman. Sacrifice yourself. So, okay. This is exactly what happens. And Odysseus does sleep with Circe. She turns his men back into animals. It's important to note he did not enjoy it. He did it for his men. And he keeps doing it for the next year. We're not really sure who that's for. I have my suspicions, but nevertheless, the idea here is that he's suffering the exact opposite fate of his men. His men were turned into pigs who had the conscious minds of men to realize that they were not supposed to be this. Odysseus falls prey to a different paradox. He's not turned into a pig. He's still a man, but he does lose his awareness that he's supposed to be more than this. Mentally, he is behaving like a pig. Mentally, he is staying here with Circe, forgetting about his journey home, forgetting about the outside world, becoming a part of the primal island. He is living a base existence where his cunning has no place. His mind is not serving him at this point. He is a primal animal that is living, eating, mating, and has no further goals in life. It is eventually his men who have to snap him out of it. Now, after his men snap him out of it, he had to snap them out of the Lotus Eaters thing. He had to physically, drag them, bind them, put them back on the boat, and get the hell out of there. They don't have to go quite that far with him, but almost. He realizes, okay, he's got to get out of here, needs to move on. Circe lets him go. She's not interested in forcing him to stay, but she tells him if he wants out of this existence with the goal of getting home, he can go to hell. But she means it literally. He's going to have to go to hell and back in order to get home. So she sends him to hell to see this dead prophet, Tiresias, who's going to tell him what he's going to have to do in order to eventually get back home. And Tiresias tells him that it is possible for him to make it back home, but only if he curbs his wild desires, which is something he has failed at up until this point. He has been, for the past year, living a primal life with Circe that has been nothing but wild desires, totally untethered from who he really is as the man of twists and turns, a man whose purpose centers around his mind and his cunning. Overcoming the external obstacles of the people who stop him, the Cyclops and these types of things, sea monsters, Poseidon, that's only part of Odysseus's journey. He's told flat out at this point that that is only half the battle. The other part of the battle is that you have got to gain control over yourself. You must not only master these monstrous forces, these forces of nature, and overcome them to get home, you are going to have to master and overcome yourself if you want to reach your true desires. In fact, you're going to have to order your desires, because there's a part of you that desires to stay there with Circe and to just live a primal life, an unthinking life, a life with no deeper meaning, no deeper responsibility, just primal senses minus the mind. There's a part of you that clearly wants that, but you can't have both. You either have to stay with Circe in that life, or you have to prioritize your wants. Do you want to make it home? What do you want? And in many ways, this story is not just about the adventure to get home. It is the adventure to discover what you truly want when you use your mind to sift through the different wants and prioritize them into the order that is actually going to bring you satisfaction. Now, while Odysseus is in hell, he crosses paths with Achilles again. And he is basically telling Achilles, your legend lives forever. He has achieved Kleos, glorious fame. And in Achilles' case, eternal glorious fame. Achilles was, in fact, at the beginning of his journey presented with a choice. He could have Kleos, what every warrior wants, undying glory and fame that would live forever, but it's going to require his death in Troy to achieve that. Or he could have what Odysseus is ostensibly trying to achieve, a nostros, a homecoming. But if Achilles chooses his nostros, he will go home, he will have wife, he will have children, he will have a wonderful life, he will have what he wants, but it will be minus Kleos. He will have no glory and fame, he will not be remembered by men, he will not be part of the story, and he has to choose. And basically, Odysseus is telling him, you got what you wanted, man. You got the Kleos. Everyone knows who Achilles is. And Achilles basically tells him to shut his mouth. He pretty much tells him, I made the wrong choice. The way he puts it is that he would rather be the slave of the lowest serf, a tenant farmer who's bound to the land. He would rather be that slave of that low person, somebody with no Kleos at all, no glory, no fame, completely anonymous in their meaningless low-level life. he would rather be alive and have that than to be king of the dead here in hell with all the Kleos in the world. And that's quite an about face from the idea of the Iliad. So this is part of the story and what happens next. It's important to take these lessons that Odysseus learns in hell with him. And there is one other factor before we get to the next woman that you kind of have to take into that story too, is the sirens. He's going to have to sail by the sirens in order to continue on his journey. He wants to hear their song, but he knows, Circe has warned him, that the sirens' song lures men to their deaths. If you hear it, you're basically hypnotized. You have to hear it. You will keep getting closer and closer until your ship crashes on the rocks. You'll drown. That's what happens to everyone. So he puts wax in the ears of all of his other sailors, and he makes them tie him to the ship mast, where he can't dive overboard, he can't kill himself, he can't be stupid, but he wants to hear what they have to say. And so he sails by the sirens in this condition, and what they have to say is kind of interesting. They flatter him, first off. You know, oh, Odysseus, the great warrior, and we know who you are. They offer him knowledge. Okay, but knowledge that no other man hears and survives. All other men are lured to their death by the promise of this knowledge. So this is an elite knowledge that is not accessible to all. And that offer is appealing. Okay, you think about conspiracy theories, and this is not a comment on is this particular conspiracy theory true or that one false, or does it have any legitimate questions to it. That's not the point. What's alluring about a conspiracy theory, any conspiracy theory, the true ones, the false ones, whatever, is the idea that you are red-pilled. You are alive to this knowledge when everyone else is dead. They're blind, but you see. You hear it, they don't. And there is something intoxicating about that. To have knowledge that others don't, whether it's because they don't have access to it, they're too stupid to see, they believe what they're told, and I'm smart enough to see through it. Whatever it is, there is something intoxicating about that. And yet, there is something deadly about that. Because, you know, I would just ask the people who get into this world, do you actually feel alive? You don't seem to. The people I've known that have gone down that rabbit hole become ghosts. They fall prey to the sirens. They become shadows who seem to exist in a dead world that they hate for being dead. Their only pride is in their ability to see how dead it is and how dead they are in it. This knowledge doesn't seem to have life on the other side of it. It does seem to be a place of death. And in Odysseus's case, the sirens not only offer him this deadly knowledge, they not only flatter him, but both are geared towards his suffering in Troy. We know what you went through there. We know what happened there. The knowledge is connected to that, the ability to understand your own pain. And there is a deadliness in that as well. Not that we shouldn't try to understand our own pain or that we should stuff it down. That's not what I'm advocating for. But there is in it the temptation to get lost in the pain of the past, to live in the pain of the past, to never move into the future, to stay a victim to the pain of the past and just replay it, and replay it, or even the glories of the past. Either way, what the sirens are inviting him to is a self-destructive nostalgia, to get into this cycle of your pain, the past, understanding what went wrong in the past, reveling in the achievements of the past, looking at the past through rose-colored glasses of the glories that you will never achieve again, or that maybe your ancestors achieved and you will never achieve again. It is important to note that this offer is standing in the way of Odysseus' homecoming if he listens to it and takes them up on it. It will accomplish what the monsters could not. It will lure him to his death. So there is an important lesson to be found in that. Then we make it to the second woman that Odysseus encounters. His men eat the cattle of the sun god. They're all killed at sea. Odysseus washes up on an island. This island is different than Circe's. It is not a wild medieval forest full of enchanted primal creatures and a primal life and a primal existence. No. This is a fantasy. This island is more like the Garden of Eden. It's a paradise. It's not wild. It's a paradise. And it's on the edge of the world. Calypso lives in monk mode. There are no other people. Even the gods have to travel a long time to reach her. And by the way, her island is so much of a paradise that even the god Hermes is spellbound by it. It is a true fantasy. Okay, so this is not an animal existence. This is a fantasy experience. Calypso is a nymph. She's basically a goddess. She doesn't age. She's perfect in beauty. She too is a fantasy. And Odysseus has the choice of staying there with her. In fact, Calypso keeps him there against his will for 7 years. Unfortunately for Odysseus, by this point, he is not going through the same temptation of Circe. He lost himself with Circe and became this primal animal living a primal animal's existence, forgetting utterly what his mind, the real Odysseus, wants. That's not true with Calypso. He knows what he wants. He wants to make it home. Remember, he's had this conversation with Achilles. He's made his choice at this point. He doesn't want the glory. He doesn't want the fantasy. He wants his nostros. He wants his homecoming. He wants to go home. And also, Tiresias has told him, suitors are after your wife, man. Your home has got 100+ people in it who are all every day doing everything they can to sleep with your wife. And with that knowledge, the knowledge that he does in fact want to go home, he knows what he wants, and the knowledge that he may be losing Penelope at any moment as she despairs that he's dead and never coming back, as she gives in to the pressure of these suitors. For 7 years, he lives with that. And every day, it makes him weep on the beach. He knows what he wants. what he wants, but it's not within his reach. He's in paradise, and he's miserable. He's living the fantasy in an Eden, in monk mode, not having to deal with the rest of the world or its problems, with a goddess who wants him desperately. And he spends his days sobbing about it. Calypso is not just offering the sex of Circe, she wants him to marry her. She's desperate to have him. Now, to be clear, they are sleeping together. Once again, he does what he has to do, man. I know all of our hearts bleed for him having to have sex with a goddess every night for 7 years. Poor man. But Homer says he was an unwilling lover with a very willing lover. That's how he describes Odysseus and Calypso. She was very willing. Apparently he was not. But he did what he had to do, man. For 7 years. Calypso wants him to marry her. So this is not an animal existence. This is not full-on hedonism. But it's a fantasy. She offers him a life that is more than the one he just turned down, the animal existence. Marriage is not something that any other species does. It is a human thing. It's appealing to who he is on a human level. But the human Odysseus wants to go home. This is a fuller life, a more human life than the one that Circe offered him. But at the end of the day, it's a life of perfected ease without any need for his intelligence. There are no problems to solve. There is no purpose. The island is paradise. It produces what you need. The woman doesn't need you. She's a goddess. She has no problems. She doesn't seem to have an intelligence that meets his needs as an intelligent man, because when she asks him why he wants to go home to his wife, who is older than her and still aging, who is mortal, who is not her equal in physical beauty, she's a goddess, Penelope is not, he says that he wants his wise Penelope. This seems to be a roundabout way of nicely pointing out what Calypso is not offering. He's not satisfied with the fantasy. And see, that's the thing about fantasies. They never are satisfying. She offers him immortality. If he marries her and stays with her, she will make him into a god. He will be immortal. He will never age. But he already had this conversation with Achilles. And Achilles said he would rather be the slave of a serf among the living than to be king of the dead. To be immortal is not really to be alive. There is a great scene in the movie Troy when Brad Pitt's character Achilles is talking to Briseis, his love interest, and he tells her, I will clue you in on something that your priests don't tell you in your temple. The gods envy us. They envy us because we're mortal, because every moment might be our last. You will never be lovelier than you are now, and we will never be here again. At which point, she replies with one of my favorite lines in the movie, saying, I thought you were a dumb brute. I could have forgiven a dumb brute. But that's kind of the point of this as well. You're not alive if you're not mortal. You're not living if it's a fantasy. Odysseus turns down Calypso's offer of immortality, and he does so having seen the land of the dead. To turn down her offer of immortality is to embrace the fact that one day, whether he dies very soon on his journey home, whether he dies many years from now, after making it home, he will die, and he will go to the land of the dead, this place that he visited, that he's seen with his own eyes. This is the price he will pay. He can't avoid that if he takes Calypso up on her offer. And yet he doesn't. Because by this point, Odysseus, both with his experience with Circe, his conversation with Achilles, his encounter with the sirens, has come to realize that endless life without the things that make life worth living it is no more worthwhile than the choice that Achilles made to sacrifice life and Nostros, the homecoming, for glory, for Kleos. Undying fame that does him not an ounce of good as king of the dead means nothing to him. Because your fame is not yours, it's other people's. It's what they experience of you. Your life still lacked all the meaning, and the meaning is found in the Nostros, in the home, in the homecoming, not in the fame. You don't live your fame. Your fame is for other people. Your fame is about how they see you. And you get to watch them see you as something that you're actually not. That can't replace a life that was actually lived. Odysseus knows all of this and endures 7 years knowing that every moment of it, Penelope might be sleeping with one of the suitors, that it may be too late when and if he gets home, knowing what he wants and not being able to reach it. But by this point, he knows that the fantasy is not what he wants. By this point, Athena has interceded for Odysseus with Zeus, and Zeus has sent Hermes to tell Calypso, let him go. You've had your boy toy for 7 years. You've had your fun. Let him go. And she does. She's not happy about it, tries to convince him to stay of his own free will. Again, offers him immortality, all these things. But ultimately, he says no, he wants his wise Penelope. He's going home. All right. But before he reaches home, he uncovers his last and greatest temptation. Nausicaa. Nausicaa is not a primal, magical force like Circe. She is not a divine goddess fantasy like Calypso. Nausicaa is human. And she's young. Something that Penelope is not. At least not anymore. Odysseus left her as a new mother with an infant. His son's like 19, 20 years old by this point, so, she's pushing at least 40. She's not a young girl in the prime of her beauty anymore. Now, that's no diss to Penelope. She got 108 men who still want her. Now, to be fair, what they really want is the status of having claimed Odysseus's widow, but still, she is clearly not an undesirable woman. But nor is she some 19-year-old beautiful virgin bride. So Nausicaa is human. She's young. She's not offering the primal. She's not offering the fantasy. What she's offering is real, but it's a perfected real. She's offering marriage. So, way more than Circe. Calypso also offered marriage, but this is not an immortal marriage. It's the real deal. You will grow old with this woman. You will have children with this woman. It's a real marriage. She's wealthy. He will be wealthy for marrying her. She's young. Penelope's not young. These are realities. These are not fantasies. These are the realities. Her island is not uninhabited. It is an occupied island. It's full of other people, and not like the Cyclops that are barbarians. No, there is society here. There is art, sculpture, bards to sing. There are celebrations and festivals. There are sporting events. There are other people. There's peace. But no need. Everything is perfect. The land is fruitful. It supplies all your needs. Society has already been ordered. It functions perfectly. The art exists. It's there. It's beautiful. The bards are there to sing the songs and do it well. The sports keep you occupied. It's not an empty life, but it's a life that's already perfected. It's easy. It's a turnkey home. It doesn't need anything, including him. This world doesn't actually need Odysseus. There are no problems to solve. It's real, but it's perfect. Which means for a man like Odysseus, a man with polytropos, many twists and turns, there is no game for him to play with the toys the gods have given him. There is no problem that needs his cleverness, that needs his solutions. There is nothing for him to do here. It's a life that is already perfect. It's not one that he built, or he improved, or he wrestled from the earth with his bare hands. It's not something he constructed. It's not something, therefore, that is really his. It is something that he can walk into, and it's real. It's not the fantasy of Calypso. It's not the primal Jungle Book wild man of Circe. It's real. But it's the same whether he's there or not there. He can live it, but he can't contribute to it. You can see why this would be the greatest temptation. It seems like the best compromise of all of the available options. But Odysseus does know what he wants by this point. And what he wants is Penelope and Ithaca. Okay, Penelope is the mother of his child. That's far from meaningless. But he doesn't even know his own child. His child was an infant when he left. He knows that Penelope is wise. He's described her as that, so she is a match for him. She is someone that appeals to his mind, which in Odysseus' case is the prime source of who he is. So she appeals to who he is as a person in a way that these other women, despite their many attractions, just do not. At the end of the poem, she's described as being self-possessed. And once again, this is a match for Odysseus. He too, at this point, is self-possessed. He knows what he wants. He has the cunning to get it and the will to do so. And this is absolutely reflected in Penelope. She is not a goddess. She is not perfect. She is not young. She is not a fantasy. She is not a trophy wife. She is not the wife that he left behind that would have been Nausicaa's age when he left her. She is real, not perfect, but real. Ithaca, too, is unmistakably real. This is not a wild forest appealing to the primal. It is not a paradise garden of Eden. It is not even Nausicaa's island that is human but perfectly ordered. Ithaca is rocky, a difficult place to live, hard to survive on. It's limited. Earlier in the story, I believe it's Menelaus offers Odysseus' son some horses, and he tells him, wouldn't do him any good. They can't survive on Ithaca. Your options are limited. The cattle can't be there. You can't have horses there. There's only certain creatures that are even going to survive there. So this is not some perfect place by any means. It's got a lot of drawbacks to it. I mean, you got to remember, at this point, he's been with Calypso for 7 years. He doesn't know if Penelope has remained faithful. He may be doing all of this to get home to a wife who has moved on and married someone else, been unfaithful. He knows from the fact that she has all of these suitors pursuing her for the last 7 years that the island is a mess politically. It's going to take a lot to clean this up. So it's an older woman, not some young beauty. It's a rocky island, not some paradise. It's a place with real people who are not perfectly ordered into a society that functions smoothly. It's a mess. In other words, it's real. And at best, choosing reality is going to require a risky battle, a fight to regain order in that reality of chaos. And even if you win, there will eventually be death. A death that he really has a grasp on at this point, having been to hell. And yet this is the island, and this is the woman that he chooses. The cunning man, who did have other choices. Why, and what does that tell us? It tells us that Odysseus, at least, has decided that it's through the struggle and the disorder that there is any usefulness for his gifts. His cunning is who he is. I mean, sure, he could live off of the Trojan horse forever. That was a cunning trick. But once again, doing the siren thing and living in the past is living in a tomb. What's the point to him still being alive today for that? The past is the past. In this real world of Ithaca, and the real risk of battle, and the real political order that needs to be corrected, and the real battle that's going to have to be fought, this is the offer of glory, his kleos, and his homecoming, nostros, in one. Odysseus has figured out that happiness only exists, having tried it in all of these other circumstances, happiness only exists in real accomplishment. It doesn't exist hiding, buried in monk mode, in a cave, even in paradise, with a goddess. Because that existence holds no possibilities, no options, no achievements. Without those achievements, there is no glory. Without the meaning, there is no nostros, no homecoming. And without either of those things, there is no real appeal when you get down to it. It's monotonous, even if it's perfect, even if it is a fantasy. It is only in the real, messy, disordered human world that there is any life. All three of those other options were missing life. And so it is only in the real, the messy, the disordered human world that is the only sphere on the epic journey of Odysseus where any form of greatness is even possible. There was no greatness to be had in the primal animal existence with Circe. It just was what it was. There was no greatness that was possible in the immortal paradise fantasy life with Calypso. It just was what it was. There wasn't even any greatness possible in the perfected, prepackaged life with Nausicaa. The assertion seems to be that what is real is what is alive, and that life is ultimately what is good. And Odysseus does make it back to Ithaca, and he does make it back to Penelope, and he does have to fight a battle in order to set straight the polis, the political order. Which tells us something. I mean, the epic accomplishments of the hero's Odyssey are not ever accomplished by abandoning one's family or one's own political order, even if those things come with chaos and disorder and have so many things wrong with them as they do for Odysseus. Through his cunning and endurance and struggle and hard labor, things are put right and restored. And that is ultimately what the lesson is. That yes, of course your political order is a mess. Of course your life is not perfect. Of course the woman that you're with is getting older. And of course it is going to require the use of your human brain and some actual real endurance and determination. It's going to mean struggle and hard work. And through that, things can be put right. And your order, your political order, and your home can be restored when you're willing to do that, because you see that that is the only existence that is worth it. That's the hero's journey. It's not easy, but that's why it's the hero's story and not everyone's story. That's exactly what makes it admirable, is the fact that it isn't easy. It isn't the easy way out. It isn't the perfect situation just handed to you. If it was easy, there wouldn't be anything about it to admire. And that's exactly what was missing from any of the alternative lives that Odysseus might have had on any of the other islands besides his own, and with any of the other women besides his own. You know, the story of the Odyssey opens with Zeus making the assertion that men blame the gods for the suffering that they bring on themselves. That's certainly the case in this story. Odysseus' suffering is brought on by himself and by his men and by other human beings, the suitors, the political order that's fallen apart on Ithaca. The gods don't do anything to him, really. I mean, Poseidon kind of goes after him, but in revenge for Odysseus blinding his son. So once again, Odysseus made a decision, then he made another one to tell his victim his name, which allowed him to ask Poseidon to curse this man. And he did that completely in hubris. Odysseus just had to let the guy know who had bested him. Men blame the gods for the suffering that they bring on themselves. We chase a primal existence and blame society for the fact that it's not really happy. We pursue fantasies and dreams of utopia and blame one another or God or the universe or whatever for it not being workable, for it not being real. We say we want a perfect life that doesn't need a thing fixed in it to fall into our laps, even though the first thing we would do with it would be to smash it to make something happen, as people that are much smarter than me have noted. But we blame everything and everyone else for the fact that life doesn't actually work that way, and you wouldn't actually enjoy it if it did. We'll circle back around to that at the conclusion here, but I want to touch briefly on the movie, having covered the poem and what I found interesting about the poem. The first thing I should tell you is that I have not seen the movie. I want to. I will as soon as I have the opportunity to. I have not had the opportunity to see it yet, but I've listened to multiple people talk about it. Those who are vested in hating it predictably hated it. Those who are vested in loving it predictably loved it. And most people seem to say, yeah, okay. It was not a cataclysmic catastrophe, nor was it the greatest movie ever made that will go down in classics. That sounds about right to me. That's what I'm going in expecting it to be. Everyone seemed to, or almost everyone, those who are not vested in hating it, seemed to agree that it was beautifully shot. Nolan does know what he's doing when it comes to visuals. He's a very visually compelling director. I have no trouble believing that it was visually shot well. The trailer seems to indicate that. The only other thing that everyone seemed to agree on was that Rob Pattinson as the villain was incredible. He seems to be the only one that everyone agrees turned in a great performance. I look forward to seeing it. I don't know that I've ever seen him play a villain, a truly dislikable character before. Apparently he nails that. That will be interesting. I'm looking forward to that. Most of the cast got kind of ratings on their performances. That it was, like, by no means bad performances, but it was not, like, groundbreaking and earth-shattering either. As for the problems with the film, based on the information that I have, here's basically my take on it. People's problems were the choices that deliberately take you out of the film. Now, granted, when you're watching a movie, the idea is to immerse yourself in the story. Anything that snaps you out of it, even for a minute, is a failure on the part of the movie. So apparently some of the dialogue was modernized to the point that it stuck out here and there, snapped you out of it for a moment, because this is just not the way you would express yourself in a period drama like this. That seems to be a needlessly stupid mistake. But also, I have yet to hear anyone say that it ruined the entire movie for these few instances to have existed. The next biggest thing seems to be the casting stuff that we knew going into it. The two main examples of that being the woman who played Helen and Elliot Page playing a man. So, just to briefly touch on those. I don't like hypocrisy. So if we're going to live in a world where only gay people can play gay people, and only black people can play black people, and so on and so forth, if those are going to be the rules, then they do need to be the rules across the board. And Helen of Troy was not a sub-Saharan African. She was Greek. She was Helen of Sparta. Sparta is in Greece. She was a Greek woman. This was not a Greek woman. And the Asian men on Odysseus' crew calling out things like, we're Greeks from Ithaca, I can understand why that would be more of a humorous, unintentionally humorous line than anything else. That being said, it's my understanding that the woman who plays Helen of Troy, because Helen of Troy is not prominent in the story of the Odyssey, is like on screen between the two parts that she plays as Helen and Helen's sister, maybe is there for 5 minutes, okay? Again, I don't like hypocrisy. If these are going to be the rules, then they need to be the rules for everybody. But at the same time, I don't think that it ruins the film. For the people saying that everyone in the movie should have been Greek to make it authentic, okay? If the goal of the movie is to be authentic, that's a fair point. However, you probably cannot name 5 top-tier quality actors who are Greek. So where are you getting enough people for this picture? In order to do that, you have to trade off and get low-level actors that you've never heard of before to staff the whole thing. Now, maybe you're willing to make that trade, but it is a trade, okay? I would rather have Matt Damon play Odysseus and, give the guy a tan, darken his hair, Greek him up, and let's pretend that he's Greek. Rather than say, you can't act as anything except what you are, that you have to be gay to play a gay man, you have to be Greek to play a Greek, so on and so forth. Now look, it is different in historical dramas, okay? It is. George Washington was a historical figure. Harriet Tubman was a historical figure. If you make a movie about Harriet Tubman, you cannot cast Nicole Kidman as Harriet Tubman. And, in keeping with that, you cannot cast Denzel Washington as George Washington. Okay? Like, if you're talking about historical movies, yes, these things need to factor into it. And that's not because Denzel Washington is a bad actor. I think he's a phenomenal actor. But not everything is a historical piece. For example, if you've seen Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing, Denzel Washington is in that. This is a Shakespearean play. It's set in Italy. Denzel is not Italian. Does that bother me when I watch that movie? No. Denzel is a phenomenal actor. It's not a historical piece. It's a Shakespearean play. Guess what? The very first men who played in Much Ado About Nothing were British. They weren't Italian either. Okay? Sometimes this stuff matters and sometimes it doesn't. In a case like Helen of Troy, does it strike me as virtue signaling that they would go out of their way to choose a sub-Saharan African woman to play Helen when they could have picked someone that at least looked more Greek? Sure, it's a virtue signal thing, but is it the end of the freaking world? No. Does the 5 minutes with that mean that the whole thing needs to be thrown out? Give me a break, okay? I'm not this fragile. Now look, I don't like the hypocrisy. I agree. And if it's historical figures, I will go to the mat on that. Like I said, it would be ridiculous for Nicole Kidman to play Harriet Tubman, or for George Clooney to play Martin Luther King Jr., okay? It would be ridiculous. And it's just as ridiculous for Morgan Freeman to play George Washington, or for Will Smith to play Thomas Jefferson, okay? If you're talking about historical stuff, that's different. But it didn't bother me when Denzel Washington played in Much Ado About Nothing, because that's not history, it's a play. It's a play set in a historical place, in a historical time, but it's a play. It's fiction to begin with, and guess what? Homer's Odyssey is too. Okay? So, chill. I know that's not going to make me popular, but chill. Is it dumb that they went out of their way to make Helen as least Greek as she could be? Yeah, that's dumb. And it doesn't impress anyone, and there was no need for it. Is it a big deal? As in it ruined the whole movie? It didn't ruin the whole movie. It's dumb. That's the worst that can be said about it. Ellen Page, or Elliot Page now. I don't use people's preferred pronouns, but I do try to use their names. You have the right to change your name. That was a slip. I apologize. But, alright, that is a believability factor. Because Elliot Page is playing a character that's not even in the Odyssey. Sinon. This is somebody that Virgil and Dante added into the story later. Sinon is, burning in hell in Dante's Inferno. But Sinon is not part of Homer's Odyssey. The person who is part of Homer's Odyssey is Achilles. As we talked about, Odysseus meets Achilles in hell. In the movie, he doesn't meet Achilles in hell. He meets Sinon in hell, which people are saying all the story that Elliot Page was going to be playing Achilles is not true. I think it's a stretch to say it's not true. The only part that's actually in the Odyssey is Achilles. The other part that Elliot Page is playing is not even in the Odyssey. So, when it comes to the Odyssey, the part that Elliot Page is playing is Achilles' part. Under a different name, having Achilles' character smashed together with Sinon's character, but it is Achilles. It's Achilles' part. And look, as a woman who is Elliot Page's size, like 5'3" and 110 pounds, I am not convincing as Achilles. Okay, I'm not. Brad Pitt, bulked up more than we've ever seen him in any other film, was convincing as Achilles. I'm not. Neither is Elliot Page. Regardless of how she identifies, regardless of how you see her. Not a convincing Achilles. So something like that does take you out of the movie. If you know that the part that she is playing is Achilles. If you don't know that, because you're just taking it at face value that she is playing some dude named Sinon, then she's still not convincing as a dude, as any dude. But is it as big of a deal when, once again, like her total screen time is 5 minutes? Once again, pulling people out of the movie is always bad, especially when you don't have to do it and you're going out of your way to do it in order to make a point. But does it ruin the whole movie? I don't know. I'm going to watch the movie myself and see for myself. It doesn't sound like those 5 minutes can ruin the whole movie. What does seem to be an issue in the movie to me, apart from a few language choices that were dumb, a few casting choices that could have been better, there was no need for them not to be better. The problem with the movie seems to me to be the rewrite of who Odysseus is and the moral of the story of the Odyssey. Odysseus is a man of polytropos, many twists and turns, a man of metis, cunning. That's who he is. Nowhere in the entire Odyssey does it indicate that he's ashamed of that, doesn't want that, or that he stops doing it. Right up to the very end, he uses his cunning to outwit the suitors, outsmart them, trap them, kill them. This never stops being a part of him. And yet, from my understanding of the film, Nolan has decided that Odysseus's cunning is a violation of Xenia, the obligation to show hospitality. Specifically, his cunning in coming up with the Trojan horse was a violation of Xenia, the obligation to show hospitality to strangers, travelers, foreigners. That is bizarre and unworkable. It really is, because A, Odysseus is clearly in the Odyssey proud of his metis, of his cunning. 2, the Trojans were not guests of the Greeks. So Xenia, the law of hospitality, doesn't apply to this situation. If anything, the Greeks were the foreigners. They're on the shores of Troy. So how are the Greeks responsible for showing hospitality to the Trojans in Troy? That doesn't even make sense. The Trojans were not the foreigners, the visitors, the travelers in that situation. And war is not a hospitality situation. This is not a guest. The Greeks were not guests who had been invited to Troy and were to be shown Xenia as peaceful travelers. They were there for war. It is bizarre. It is bizarre to try to turn the Trojan horse into a violation of hospitality. And then to give Odysseus basically PTSD, like a Vietnam vet, for the rest of the story over his violation of Xenia, which he didn't actually violate, is likewise bizarre. It's unworkable. It doesn't make any sense at all. And if you're not allowed to use cunning in war, then how is him killing the suitors not a violation of Xenia? Because they actually are in his house. He actually is obligated to show them hospitality, and yet, if he's so guilt-ridden that it wasn't hospitable of him as an invader to use the Trojan horse, but it's totally fine for him to use the same kind of cunning, his metis, to slaughter the suitor? You totally unravel the frickin' story by trying to make this fit. And I have no idea why you're trying to do it. That's not what Xenia is. Now, look, there is one indication in the Odyssey that Odysseus does have empathy for the Trojans. There's a point where he's listening to the bard on Nausicaa's island sing the song of the Trojan horse and the defeat of Troy, and he starts sobbing. And it is clear, it talks about him sobbing like a woman whose husband has been fatally wounded, who is dying in her arms, still alive, dying in her arms, as the men who killed her husband shove spears into her back, pull her away from him, shrieking as he is dying, and haul her off in slavery. Okay, that is a picture of what happened at Troy. For Homer to have used that description is an indication that Odysseus is able to empathize with his fallen enemies, unlike Achilles, who even after he killed Hector couldn't empathize, couldn't, just desecrated his body. He was so under the full control of his rage at the death of Patroclus that he couldn't even be human, Odysseus shows the humanity of recalling the women who were hauled away from their dying husbands in slavery, of the shrieking and I'm sure the rapes and the terrible things that were done, and being able to empathize with the fallen. But this is not him thinking that he did something wrong in using cunning to create the Trojan horse. Which allowed the war to end. Okay, so conflating the two, that Odysseus does have empathy for the conquered and their suffering, which he does seem to have in the Odyssey, and saying that that means he's ashamed of his cunning in the trick of the Trojan horse. That is clearly not the case in the poem. And then trying to twist all of that into a violation of Xenia is just completely unworkable. So that part, I will say, and that seems to be a consistent report on the movie, that does seem to be a serious flaw in the movie. When I am able to get a chance to see it myself, I'll see how big of a flaw it is and how much it really messes with the movie. But that does seem to be a legitimate flaw. And, one final point on the casting. I will say that if the whole point of Nolan's Odyssey was to make it as real and gritty as possible by giving Odysseus PTSD and taking the gods out of the story and making them more just his psychological manifestations of guilt and trauma in order to make it real, and then part of your ultra-real version of the Odyssey is a 5'3" woman is Achilles and a sub-Saharan African woman is Helen. I will admit there does seem to be a contradiction. Are we trying to be real here, or are we embracing the fantasy? Because pick a lane, my dude. Pick a lane. But once again, I don't think that those things are ultimately what is critical to the story. I think that it is more the projection of Nolan's own morality, his very 21st century morality, and trying to make that fit a story that it just doesn't fit. That seems to be a much more fundamental problem, and that seems to be why the movie got ratings, and that it's shot beautifully. There's some parts of it that are really great. People liked that there was not a huge amount of CGI in it. There were, puppets and things like that used whenever possible, real sets, all that sort of stuff. But there were some serious flaws, apparently, with trying to make the story have the moral to it that you wanted to twist it into having. The only other comment I will make on the movie before moving on ultimately to final conclusions is that the woman who played Helen kind of put her foot in her mouth. And look, that happens to all of us. If we get asked a question and we don't know the answer, there are people who have the integrity to say, I don't know. But your first impulse is to front. It's a bad impulse. You should fight against it because it's usually going to backfire. But when she was asked, what she would say to Homer about the Odyssey, she arched her eyebrow and tried to look clever and condescending as she criticized Homer for not giving enough parts to women. And it was kind of a, ooh, isn't she spicy kind of moment from the interviewer. And it backfired on her. Because unfortunately, we live in a world where you can't get away with this stuff anymore. You just can't. Um, if you front like that, even if 99 out of 100 people don't know enough about it either to know that you're fronting, there is now on the internet going to be that one person whose whole life is the Odyssey. They're going to call you out, and then every one of those other 99 people are going to go, I knew that, I so knew that, I didn't believe you either. And that's what happened here. It was clear this woman has not read the Odyssey. Okay? And I mean, I talked about how, as a teenager, I did not read the Odyssey either, so I'm not trying to front here. What I am saying is that this was a copy and paste answer. And when you copy and paste answers, 99 times out of 100, you would be right about an ancient manuscript being primarily about men. If you had said this about the Iliad, okay, other than Helen, there really, and Athena and a couple of the goddesses, there really isn't a heavy focus on women in the Iliad. But it's not true of the Odyssey. There are multiple goddesses that are prominent figures. We talked about the 4 women who are critical to the story. And so she got called out. And you know what? If you try to front, and once again, I understand the human instinct to do so. I'm not judging, but if you make a bad choice, it's going to backfire on you. It was a bad choice. The best thing she could have said was just, oh, sweetie, I haven't actually read the Odyssey. I've just been focused on, playing my part. I haven't actually read it, so I'm not in a position to critique Homer. That would have been charming, actually. She couldn't do that. So she copy and pasted an answer that she would have gotten away with 99 times out of 100. She just did it on the absolute wrong book where like half of the main characters are women. And she got called out for it, and she should have been. I will also point out that if you're going to copy and paste answers, doing so on a grievance basis, you're asking for it, because people are tired of the grievance stuff. If you do that, they're waiting for that one Homer expert to say bullshit so that they can pile on you, because they're tired of it. And also, if you use a copy and paste answer and you do it in favor of grievance politics, and you do it with smug condescension like Napita, I forget her name, Nyanga, destroys, dunks on what you are asking for it. You are. And so she made a really bad decision in that. You hate to see that happen with films, because a lot of these actors are so insecure and they're so political that they have to run off at the mouth, and they have to front about things that they don't know about. To be fair, if they don't, they're going to get chewed out by their other woke colleagues for not fronting, but it makes people dislike them. And then they take that into the movie, and you know what? There have been people who have ruined their careers and films over their comments. I mean, the backlash over Disney's Snow White after just the obnoxious comments that actress made really tanked that movie. And that does happen. And unfortunately, as actors keep trying to be activists, they are becoming liabilities to the studio, because when you don't know anything about these people, then you either like their characters or you don't like their characters. You don't need to know more than that. And that's great, because that allows you to make the movie. Once you know them, a lot of times they aren't that likable. Or they do this sort of condescending talk down to you, try to dunk on you, and the second they get exposed for it being a front, like, lady, you clearly haven't read the Odyssey, you're going to get dunked on back. And that's just the reality we live in. It's stupid for studios to allow this. There was a day and time when studios kind of did certain training of their actors and the way that they walked and talked and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that that was good or that we should go back to that, but studios would be wise to start investing in some public relations training for their actors, teach them how to avoid questions that are going to make them unlikable as people to the public, and try to encourage them to pull back on some of this stuff, because that does affect these movies too. But at the end of the day, once again, is that enough to tank the whole movie? No. One comment that one person playing a minor part said, it came back on her. I'm not saying it shouldn't have. If you do that, you get what you get. At the same time, it can happen to all of us. That instinct to front and to try to sound smart is strong. And so I think we should, not judge too harshly, because you're likely to find yourself in that same position at some point, and you would hope that people would understand that you didn't mean anything malicious by it. You weren't trying to be obnoxious. You just didn't want to say that you hadn't read the book. And so, do we need to make a big deal out of everything? Call it out, sure, because hopefully she learned something from that, and learned, don't try to score on people, don't try to talk down to people, don't try to front. You're not going to get away with fronting in this world anymore. Like I said, all it takes is the one Homer expert to call you out, and then everybody else is going to do exactly what they condemn her for doing, and front and say, look, I knew that the Odyssey was full of women. I didn't at the time, until taking this course. So if you're doing it even in your dunking on her, then let's understand what she was doing. Show her a little bit of grace. I'm not saying don't call her out for it. You should be called out for it when you do it. But would you like to be called out right now for saying, I knew the Odyssey was full of women, if it could be proven that, no, you don't? You've never read the book. Let's treat others the way we want to be treated, and also let's not make every mountain into a mole, or make every molehill into a mountain, okay? Now, as for the conclusions, to me, the takeaway from the Odyssey is that the right choice is to choose reality over fantasy. Yes, what a lot of people love about the Odyssey is the fantasy parts. The Cyclops, the sea monster, the sirens, all of these things, Poseidon and Zeus and Athena, and these are fun things in stories, but even this story itself is ultimately saying the choice that the hero makes, the right choice, is reality. It is Ithaca. It is Penelope. Not just the morally right choice, but right as in the functional choice. Those other choices are dysfunctional, and they're not going to bring you what you want. We live in a world where these same choices are being offered to us. That's what makes Homer timeless. There are people out there preaching the primal existence. Turn off your mind. Don't catch the feels, sweetie. Numb yourself with antidepressants. Don't feel anything. Turn it all off and live primally. Go out and have sex. Act as though there are no consequences to choices. Do drugs. There are people encouraging this. The price that you pay, and be perfectly clear, you have to pay a price, is that you have to find a way to kill your humanity. You have to find a way to kill your feelings. You have to find a way to kill your mind, your thinking about it. Most people are not successful at killing those things. Those things are pretty survival instinct heavy. They have a way of coming back. Mutilated, in pain, because you tried to kill them, but they're still there. Other people escape into the fantasy of alternate lives, dreams that they have that are not real. And the argument against what I'm saying of choose reality is always that you're saying settle. Choosing reality is not settling any more than Odysseus choosing Ithaca and Penelope was settling. What would have been settling would have been Calypso, or Circe, or Nausicaa. The fact that those lives were not real, as we discussed earlier, meant there was no place for him there. There was no need for him there. Those islands went on being the exact same with Odysseus, without Odysseus. There was no place for his métis, his cunning. There were no problems to solve. There was no purpose to be found. There was no greatness that was even possible. There were no achievements that were even on the table as maybes. That is settling. The fantasy is settling. I'm not saying don't have standards. If you're talking about the person trying to figure out who you want to be with, the lesson of this would be to choose the reality over the fantasy. Well, you're saying settle. No. You're saying don't have standards. The hell I am. The weird thing is that it's the people who pursue the fantasy who also have no standards. Like, on the one hand, the idea that, if this person is actually bad for you, if all they do is take without giving, even if they mean well, but meaning well only gets you so far if your actions are doing harm. If they're doing harm, if they're a meth addict, and that's not to say that they're not a person who has value, but it does mean that they're not somebody who's contributing positively to your life. They're going to be a negative to your life. You're going to be bringing all of that chaos into your life in exchange for nothing else. If they are promiscuous, whatever, once again, that doesn't mean that they're not a human being with value, but these are the areas where we should actually have standards and say, look, of course I reach out to you one human being to another, but there's a difference between I'm going to reach out to you one human being to another and treat you as a human being who has value and dignity and show you that I want the best for you, versus I'm going to sabotage my life by partnering with you and allow you to decimate my life with your problems. These are the places we need to have standards. But the same people who would be totally fine with that of, well, you shouldn't judge somebody for having a drug problem, and by not judge them, that means you have to date them while they're in the thralls of addiction. That you shouldn't judge someone for having a violent criminal past. You're not allowed to use common sense and really, be careful and require some massive evidence that something drastically has changed. All of these things, people who take it even further and say, you're not allowed to not be attracted to that person for whatever reason. If I'll pick on me, I'm a straight woman. Okay, that's just the way it is. I'm a straight woman. There are those who take things so far, not many of them, obviously, but there are those who take things so far as to say, well, I have to be attracted to Elliot Page. Elliot Page is a woman. That would make me a lesbian. No. She sees herself as a man. Therefore, she is a man. And if she is a man and you're not attracted to that man, then you're a bad person. Well, first of all, I'm straight. That doesn't mean that I'm attracted to every man. Okay? Second, she's not a man. She's a woman who I feel sorry for, who is struggling with serious mental problems. I'm not going to put her down, but reality is still reality. She's not a man. And I'm not obligated to be attracted to anyone. I'm attracted to who I'm attracted to. I don't owe anyone my attraction. I'm not owed attraction. Okay? I am by no means a supermodel, could have any guy I wanted woman. I'm a very, very average looking woman who has some visible deformities on my hands, so that knocks you down below average. All right? I have no problem with saying that. These are the realities, okay? I don't have the right to demand that men find me attractive. They either do or they don't. I'm not entitled to that. I can't walk up to a celebrity, pick one, whichever guy you personally find the most attractive out there, and demand that he find me attractive unless he's just a bigoted ableist. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm not really into pity sex. I'm not into guilting people into saying they're attracted to me when they're not. I mean, this is true if you're overweight. Once again, that doesn't make you a bad person. But if somebody's not attracted to you physically, they don't owe you their attraction. These are just the realities of life. And so I'm not saying that we're not allowed to have the attractions that we have, that you should settle. I'm definitely not saying that you should not have standards when it comes to who you're with. But the idea that choosing real is settling is bizarre to me. No, the fantasy is what's settling. You know, when you see an average guy who thinks he's going to score Sydney Sweeney, doubtful. Well, I'm not going to settle. Yeah, neither is she. Or, to pick on women, some of these women that, you know, the list of what they want from a guy of, well, he better be bringing in at least 6 figures, preferably 7. He better have at least a master's degree, preferably a PhD. He better be ripped. He better... Okay, I don't know who you're talking about, but if that dude exists, if you haven't just eliminated every man on the planet, that Superman got his pick of women. Okay, he's the pick of the litter. Why is he choosing you? Like, what are you bringing to the table that Superman is going to go, wow? I mean, Penelope was bringing the same thing to the table that Odysseus was. That's what he was attracted to in her. She was self-possessed, and she was wise. And ultimately, that mattered so much more than the fact that she was not immortal. She was not still young. She was not a goddess. She was not a fantasy. There was something real. Okay, let's be real. I sure as hell am not bringing enough to the table to get Superman. So, what are you bringing to the table that Superman is going to say, you, out of all the women on earth, you, that one is the one I can't live without? Because the guy you're describing really does have his pick of any woman. Now, I mean, I understand we live in an age where we're basically supposed to tell ourselves that we are the pinnacle of human existence, that there is no one that offers more than us. And if you acknowledge that you aren't a 10 on every front and maybe even an 11, that you have poor self-esteem. Basically, if you're not delusional and a narcissist, you have poor self-esteem. Okay, these are the fantasies I'm talking about. They're keeping you from having what's real. They're the siren's songs standing in your way, luring you to a dead life. And that's what fantasies are. I mean, think about it. Whatever your fantasy may be, the guy, the woman, the career, whatever it is, the status, the fame, whatever your fantasy is it producing life? I'm going to bet that what it actually creates in you is more akin to a clawing void. That fantasy of what you want and don't have and are not one step closer to getting is this clawing, eviscerating void inside. I'm going to bet it feels more like a black hole. Something that's never satisfied, always sucking in more and more, as all of the light that might otherwise bring you joy disappears inside of it. Am I close? This is why I say choose reality. Not settle for reality. That sensation I just described, that is settling. That's not living. That's not being alive. That's sure as hell not the message of the Odyssey. The truth is, you don't even want your fantasy. All it is the black hole. The delusion, the siren's song, is that if you achieved it, the black hole part wouldn't be there. That would be filled with the sun. No, it would not. That is not a bug, it's a feature. That's what a fantasy is. The black hole is exactly what it's meant to be. It is not anything else. It is the siren's song. You would not be happy with your fantasy. It's an illusion. I'm going to end with one example of that and we'll wrap it up. People think that what they want, the fantasy, if you will, is to live in a world with no rules, no right, no wrong, no obligations, no God, no pressure. Just, sing the lyrics to John Lennon's Imagine. They think that's what they want. I don't think so. Let's look at it for a minute. There were other people who thought that's what they wanted. They wanted to kill the light and be left alone in the darkness. They wanted to kill God, free themselves. And they got what they wanted. I mean, that's the part of the story that is easy to overlook. There was a moment in time when God, the Creator, the self-fueled existence that went out of its way to create man, was stripped naked by them, humiliated, tortured, hung up there in front of everyone he knew and everyone who was mocking him, bloody, shaking in shock, naked and exposed from head to toe. They wanted to kill him. And they did. Sure, his mother looked up at her naked son, and she saw what a mother saw. She saw the baby she had carried. She saw the toddler whose scraped knee she had kissed. I guarantee you she wanted to die. Next to her was the only man that we know that was at the cross, as far as the male friends of Jesus. What did he see? He looked into the eyes of God as the lights went out. God is dead. As the light of life drained from his eyes, unless you've lost someone that you love, I don't think you can understand that moment. You feel a physical shift in the world. And I can't imagine that one. You are looking into the eyes of God as the lights go out. As the cosmos goes dark. And creation itself revolts. The ground under your feet shakes violently and knocks you to your feet. Knocks you to the ground, completely off your feet. The ground that you are standing on is shaking like the rolling sea. The veil between the Holy of Holies and the rest of the temple is torn, as though God is saying, "Look at me." There was no celebration in that moment, not even from the people who wanted it. There was only terror. One of the Romans who had just crucified him said, "Surely this was the Son of God." His friends are wailing. The priests in the temple are probably doing the same. The ones who wanted his death. The temple is cracked. The veil is torn. Pilate, who tried and failed to wash his hands of the whole thing. There is nobody that is celebrating in that moment. You got your way. God is dead. I don't think there was ever a victory that was more hollow. An empty universe without God is just that, it's empty. You won. You're king of the void. Like I said, there was no triumph in that moment. There was only the void. You got your fantasy. God is dead. How does it feel? We're still being asked that question. You know, at the end of the day, your life is yours to lead however you choose. How does victory taste? You win. Here's your victory. If it feels empty, and it feels dark, and it feels dead, it doesn't have to be this way. This is what settling looks like. Real life is available, but only to the living. You have to be alive to live. That option is out there. And it is a choice. Look at the last words that God spoke in his human life. He had two things to say. My God, why have you forsaken me? My mighty, powerful God, who could change this. My Creator, why have you abandoned me? That was his humanity speaking. That was what he felt in that moment. Did his feelings not matter? Oh, I'm pretty sure they mattered an awful lot to him in that moment. Were they not real? I'm not sure it gets any more real than that. And what followed immediately after the feeling, the understandable feeling, the painful feeling, the very real feeling? A choice. The very next words were, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." Of course your feelings are real. Of course your feelings matter. A choice still has to be made. That's the choice he made. He felt abandoned, and no wonder. His creation had just taken everything from him and killed him. Why have you abandoned me? Oh, believe me, that feeling was real. And so was the choice. Into your hands I commit my spirit. I watched a movie recently that I really loved, Project Hail Mary. I loved it because it's one of the sweetest, most entertaining, most optimistic movies I've seen in a really long time. Full of real heart that's not cheesy. And there wasn't a freaking ounce of preaching anywhere in it. None. It just told a story worth telling in a way that was worth hearing, to go on a journey that was worth taking. And there's one line in it that actually surprised me. One point, Ryan Gosling, who's basically the only character for 90% of the film, or the only human actor, I should say, for 90% of the film, is talking to the woman who recruited him for this project, a very stern, serious, scientific German woman. And she mentioned something about God in passing, not at all a declaration of faith, just literally referencing the word God in a passing statement. And Ryan Gosling kind of smirks in an amused way, not in a malicious way. He goes, "You believe in God?" I mean, this is a very, very German, serious, scientific woman. I mean, it's just, it doesn't fit. And she says to him, "It beats the alternative." I feel abandoned. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Why into your hands beats the alternative. At the end of the day, we all believe in something. It's just a matter of what you believe. You either believe you're a meat package, and you do everything you can to kill the consciousness and the feelings and the humanity and everything else that doesn't exactly fit with that or make that convenient, you wind up a broken, mutilated, bloody mess of a basket case on the floor. Or you acknowledge there is more to us than simply meat, but what it is you can't define, why it's there you have no idea. All it seems to be is a burden, whatever the hell it is. And you believe that there is nothing more. That all of the order of the universe happened by accident. There is no God. You can't prove that there is no God, but you believe that. Everybody believes something. You're right. Here's your victory. You're Achilles, king of hell. How's the victory taste? If you think being alive and having something real that you can touch and hold on to, a real life with a real person, is settling, compared to what? It beats the alternative. But your life is up to you. I appreciate you listening today. I hope that there was something in here that you enjoyed. If there's something that you think someone else would enjoy, please feel free to share it. I always appreciate that. I hope you come back next week. We're going to be talking about men. A few weeks ago we talked about women. We're going to be talking about men. Maybe some people will be interested in that. I'm certainly interested in that. There may be some people who are not interested in that, whether they're feminists who say we should only ever talk about women. It's not always about you, sweetie. Sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry, but, you know, find another channel. There's someone talking about women somewhere right now. Lots of someone's. So, I mean, you have your choices, but that's not going to dictate the way I lead my life. I think all people are important. We talked about women a few weeks ago. We're going to talk about men now. And there may be some men who don't like that of, I want to hear what a woman has to say about men. Why, are you gay? Not that I'm judging you if you are, but just, I mean, the idea that women can't have an opinion on men, that's a bizarre way of looking at it, I would say. What a woman finds manly is actually very, very relevant if you're a straight man. I mean, if you're trying to attract other men, then yeah, obviously not. But most men are straight. And by the way, I mean, the same thing applies to women. The idea that men can't say anything about women. Why? Are you trying to attract other women? Because otherwise, what a man finds womanly is actually very relevant to you if you're straight. Both sexes are actually incredibly defined by the opposite sex, much more so than they are by their own sex. What another dude finds masculine is only important if you're trying to attract another dude. What another chick finds womanly is only important if you're trying to attract another chick. Most people are straight. So, the idea that the other sex isn't allowed to speak about each other I find it childish. I'm not one of these people who believe in the whole, like, no uterus, no opinion nonsense from women. If it's a human issue, everyone gets to have an opinion. It doesn't mean that they get to have the final say, but they absolutely do get to have an opinion. And you're pretty fragile if other people even having an opinion is something that is so intimidating that the existence of that alone is shattering to you. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but the idea that they cannot have an opinion, it's going to be the nuclear bomb to my existence. Like, how fragile are you? So, like I said, we're going to be talking about men, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. I enjoyed the episode that we did talking about women, and that's what we're going to be doing next week. So I hope you come back, and until then, I hope you choose to have a good week, my friends.